podcast powered by FanDuel Sportsbook. Lucky number 13 around these parts as we preview the NFL slate. I am your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. But before we get things rolling this Thursday morning, I want you guys to go to FanDuel.com, use the promo code BetTheBoard. Take advantage of your $1,000 risk-free bet for new user signups. 30-1 enhanced odds for the Seahawks and 49ers, along with the Monday Nighter between the Bills and Patriots. So plenty of great ways to build your bankroll with FanDuel Sportsbook. And Payne, busy show on tap. We got a big-time interview with John Sheeran later on, and I think we'll try and do our best to dissect some games that may not appear to be the most attractive on paper for this NFL slate.
It's a tough week. There's really not a ton that is sticking out to me. We've not really bet much this week, right? College or NFL. The college is obviously understandable. There's not a ton of games. But the NFL board is a little weird this week.
It's one of those things that it's a marathon, not a sprint, so when the board avails itself to value, you may fire on 6 to 8 positions. Some weeks you try and grind out 1 to 2 maximum, and it feels like that's the week we're headed towards here. But rather than hem and haw and break things down that way, let's dive right into the games. And we can start in Cincinnati, where it's the Bengals playing host to the Los Angeles Chargers. The Bengals a 3-point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total on the game, 50.5. Suddenly, the bloom is officially off the rose as it pertains to the Los Angeles Chargers. They start out like a house on fire, everyone talking about them as a legitimate threat, and they still may be to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC West. But over the last couple of weeks, the market has caught up to them. The Chargers have gone just 1-5 against the number in their last 6, the lone cover coming at the hands of the Philadelphia Eagles. When you look at this team offensively, Payne, you were the first to point out that you can't get by on smoke and mirrors with 70% conversion rate on third downs, and Joe Lombardi has really put this offense behind the 8 ball. They're going to get tested by an underrated Bengals defense.
Yeah, you're spot on, and I think part of the poor ATS numbers was market, right? Was price. A lot of the perception in the Chargers came to fruition in terms of how oddsmakers and how bettors were betting them, and it forced a little bit of inflation there, and at the same time, the defense is just fallen off a cliff. But one thing I'm always trying to do is be on top of change before others spot the change, and that's how you are most successful beating markets. And you hit this perfectly in that I don't think anyone identified the Chargers' offensive issues before us on early downs, but it is important to note when changes happen in the other direction as well. And just because, you know, a lot of times, right, when you're thinking about sports and you hear people on radio and television talking to them, right, you think they can't change their opinion. With us, it's completely different because this is a market, and markets change and data changes, and you have to be ahead of those changes. So what I am noticing with the Chargers offense, and we saw this initially, or like Brandon Staley got up on his soapbox during the bye and said, like, we're going to self-evaluate, and he identified what we did, and that's his offense wasn't very good on early downs, and he understood that Justin Herbert was bailing out the entire operation on 3rd and 4th down, and Staley was even talking specifically about looking at EPA numbers. The Chargers offense pre-bye week, 25th in EPA per play on 1st and 2nd down the first 3 quarters. Post-bye week, the Chargers are 3rd in EPA per play with the same parameters. And the kicker here is the schedule has been more difficult post-bye. And what's really good about this is the Chargers' 3rd and 4th down efficiency has remained top 10 both pre and post-bye. So now you're getting the best of both worlds. And what you're looking at now is a Chargers offense overall that's number 2 in efficiency. You have an uber-talented quarterback. You have nice weapons. You have a improved O-line, although the right side of it is a little bit in shambles right now. And the world seems right again when we kind of think about this offense. The Bengals defense, for as improved as it is year over year, has not been tested like this. They've played a schedule of offenses that's bottom 5 in the NFL. And if you look at the down and distance efficiency, where since he's been most vulnerable, it's on 1st down and 3rd down. Bottom 3rd of the league in NFL efficiency on those 2 downs, and those are the 2 downs now where Chargers are rolling on early downs, and they've been fantastic all season on third and fourth down. So something to think about there. The two best offenses Cincinnati has played this season, Green Bay and Cleveland, lost both those games. The Chargers metrically are better than both. And the one thing that gives, I would say, the Bengals defense a chance here is the front four, right? We kind of talked about this since the preseason previews. Cincinnati has the most expensive defensive line in the NFL. And so far they are doing very well, right? That the high-priced talent's working there. They're fourth in defensive line yards. They're above league average in pressure rate despite blitzing at the sixth least rate. All of the new Chargers pieces up front haven't really married together all that well to this point. And as I mentioned, the right side is beat up. So if there is a spot where the Bengals defense could have success slowing the Chargers offense down, look to the right side of that Chargers O-line if the Bengals are able to get pressure off the left side.
When you look at this Chargers team, if the offense is the strength of this ball club, clearly there are some deficiencies defensively. We know Asante Samuel missed the game last week dealing with a concussion, and the Chargers right now are allowing more than 31 points per game over their last 7. Only the New York Jets are worse in that particular category. They're last in the league against the run, who will be facing the league's number 3 rusher in Joe Mixon. Allowed 140-plus yards on the ground in 5 out of 7 in 7 games total this season. Yards per carry, not much better. And I guess the relative strength has been against the pass, which, hey, may come in handy here against Joe Burrow and his talented receiving core. To opposing defenses' credit, they found a way to neutralize Lamar Chase in recent weeks, but T. Higgins had the breakout performance that I think a lot of people had been looking for last week in the Bengals' dominant offensive performance against the Steelers.
Higgins was awesome. What a catch in the end zone there. Burrow just feathered that thing in really early. Unlike the Chargers offense, the Chargers defense has been downright dreadful since the bye. Evenly horrific against the run and pass. 28th in overall EPA per play allowed since the bye. We know they haven't been able to stop the run all season. Some of it by design. A majority of it because the interior of the defensive line parts aren't there to play the style Brandon Staley wants. But all told, Chargers dead last, 32nd against the run. And with Joe Burrow now healthy and a slew of weapons, plus an O-line that is shockingly better creating run lanes for Mixon, the Bengals have this really balanced offense that can kind of morph week to week. They're tough to stop, right? Like, tough to game plan for. There's just so much talent. And even if Zach Taylor isn't great disguising things and calling plays, the talent makes up for it, right? I mean, you think about a first-round pick, an O-line that is playing improved, those 3 weapons, a great tight end, a back in Mixon that's super healthy right now. It's just like there's just a ton of talent there. And the Bengals, number 1 in EPA per play since week 7 on early downs the first 3 quarters because of that. The Bengals O-line that I mentioned, 8th in line yards, 10th in run block win rate. They will have success running it with Mixon against this defense, in my mind. And based on what I heard from Brandon Staley's presser, it looks like it's another game without lead corner Asante Samuel Jr., who you mentioned. Huge loss. He's the only cornerback on the roster that has a positive PFF coverage grade. Obviously, Derwin James does as well. He's the safety, but Asante Samuel Jr., the only cover corner with a positive PFF coverage grade. So that's a huge loss here. And so, kind of going back to the Bengals' ability to morph offensively, Mixon will have success. But if you look from weeks 4 through 9, we saw the Bengals top 5 in pass rate on early downs the first 3 quarters. So I don't really see a situation where the Bengals aren't having success offensively. Now, there is a band of rain that is coming from about 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., about a 45% chance of rain, 13-mile-per-hour winds, gusts into the mid-20s. Then there's another band around 5 p.m. Obviously, weather changes hourly, so keep an eye on that as we approach kickoff. But it feels like the game might be able to sneak within both of those bands, but keep an eye on that. But I do envision Cincinnati having success here offensively, but when it comes down to the price, it is certainly tough to get me to think Cincy minus like 3.3 right now, which is the number, is the right number here.
I love when Payne plays meteorologist, so I can't wait until Monday night. We get some potential lake effect snow between New England and Buffalo. Will be the day of. You may have to go into barometric pressure and everything else. A high pressure system rolling in from the east. There's a jet stream here or there. I mean, it really shows your versatility as a handicapper.
Yes, yes, it does. Hoping things are clear by Monday.
One final thing on this game. Are you going to be okay if Zach Taylor finds his way atop the heap as coach of the year, as he's sitting his third favorite right now behind Cliff Kingsbury and Bill Belichick?
Sheesh, sheesh. It's tough to fathom. Like literally, if you did a silent poll and just said and gave it to every coach in the NFL, rank head coaches, Zach Taylor is undoubtedly coming in the bottom 5, and there is potential for him to win Coach of the Year. That's how much talent's here. I mean, I don't think people realize this. We knew the skill position talent, but when you can pop in a second-round talent like T. Higgins with Jamar Chase and a number 1 overall quarterback pick in Joe Burrow, and Joe Mixon finally healthy, we knew what he was, that versatile back that can run and catch it out of the backfield. C.J. Uzomah has basically become this. No one knew who he was, but it's like, oh. All of a sudden, he's killing Humphrey in one-on-one coverage at Baltimore. It's like, oh, he's pretty good too. And then everyone forgets about Boyd being one of the best slot receivers in the game. And then all of a sudden, you're getting an offensive line that's playing well above their talent level, at least as run blockers. And so this offense right now is quite dynamic. And again, it does have that ability to morph, not just game to game, but down to down.
I'm not going to lie. I really thought this was the kind of performance we could see from the Bengals, but I didn't expect it to happen this year with Zach Taylor. I figured it would happen in 2022 with a new offensive-minded head coach to get all of these weapons on the same page.
Well, you also forget that, most expensive D-line in the NFL,
yeah,
most expensive secondaries in the NFL, and so it's like, whoo, offensive talent and an expensive defense. Who would have thought?
Let it be a lesson to the Green Bay Packers who don't want to spend any money in free agency and may have let the best years of Aaron Rodgers' career go out the window.
Boy, why do you have to take a jab at the Packers? We're certainly going to get hate mail again.
Well, I mean, because they're not playing, so I have to take a jab. One way or another. I can't leave well enough alone.
What you just did was compared the Cincinnati Bengals and didn't even compare them.
I said that the Bengals like to spend money, that they spend money on the defensive side, that the Green Bay Packers should follow their example. The Green Bay Packers just raised an ungodly amount of imaginary stock that they can put into players.
Stop now.
All right.
Do you understand what you just said? The Packers should compare themselves to the Cincinnati
I said
Bengals.
I did not say no. Do not put words in my mouth.
Effectively, that's what you said.
I said they should spend money.
Look to the Cincinnati Bengals.
I said they should spend money. I said they shouldn't pattern themselves after the Bengals. There's no comparison in terms of the way the two franchises are run. I just said they should spend money. So don't you go over there manipulating my words.
Huge Packer fan, despite losing money betting the Rams. Send your hate mail to Todd if you want. I can send you his email address.
All right, we're moving on from here. We're going to two traditional powers, relatively speaking, in the Vegas Raiders and the Washington football team. Late afternoon out here in my backyard with Vegas, a 2.5-point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total on the game, 49.5. The Raiders have now failed to cover 7 straight games as a home favorite. A recent article from ESPN, pretty interesting, talking about Rick Bisaccia grading out as one of the worst coaches on fourth down. Behind, wait for it, drumroll please, Steelers fans, only Mike Tomlin. Go figure, a special teams coach wants to put his kickers and punters to the test. Meanwhile, when you look at Washington, short week, huge rest advantage working in the Raiders' favor in this particular contest, but this season starting to take on a very similar tenor to what we saw from Washington a season ago, picking up steam late in the year. We know that they'll play 5 divisional games to close things out, but you do wonder on a short week traveling across the country if Taylor Heineke and company can run it back and be more effective and dynamic offensively than what we saw Monday night in the win against the Seahawks.
The one thing we did mention Monday night, and what was that, 3-4 days ago? Geez, I don't even know what day it is. Scott Turner's offense is clearly made some adjustments during the bye, and it's really been a pleasant surprise. They've been good down to down, and there's also been this explosive element to their offense as well. And if you look since the bye, even after Monday night, I know there wasn't a ton of points scored, but down to down, it was pretty damn good. But Washington, top 6 in EPA per play and success rate over the last 3 games. And you see their weapons getting healthier. Logan Thomas back, Curtis Samuel back. And those guys take every single piece of attention, every single snap away from Terry McLaurin to where he can actually like breathe now. It's like, oh my God, I'm not the focus of the defense every single week, every single play. And I think that's going to help McLaurin as well. The Raiders secondary has come crashing down to earth. They were playing well above their potential early in the season, and now that pressure rates have dipped a little bit, they're going back to more of their projection that we had on them at the beginning of the season. On paper, it would look like Washington could have some success throwing here. The Raiders are 25th in defensive pass efficiency, and they've faced a below-average schedule of offenses. Washington, on the other hand, this could surprise some people, 13th in passing efficiency behind Taylor Heinicke, and it's come against the second toughest schedule of pass defenses. So, again,
get that man a contract, Payne. Get him a contract. Tell Scott to get him his millions.
There is, thanks for putting that out there. I think there's like,
well, the offense coordinator has shown an affinity for him. You figure Scott Turner might be advocating for a guy like that.
There you go. Appreciate the cover up. There is this ability here
Christ.
Where, Taylor Heinicke is clearly playing to his peak, and so that helps. But throughout the course of the season, like he's been good. We have seen some of the lulls. Lost his mind a little bit in the Green Bay game, but they have been able to move it. And is he a above average NFL starting quarterback for the next decade? Probably not, but he's certainly playing pretty well now. He's not the guy that I think the casual fan or the public believes him to be, And Washington's offensive line has been really good as run blockers as well. Number 1 in the league in run block win rate. So having that balanced attack certainly helps Taylor Heinicke. Raiders defense has been beaten up in some games on the ground, particularly of late, partly from scheme. Their ends are told to get up the field. But since the bye week, the Raiders 18th in EPA per rush allowed on the season, 17th in defensive rush efficiency, so below average on the season and trending that way as well. Do have to keep an eye on J.D. McKissick, very versatile, can run the ball, can catch it out of the backfield, matchup nightmare for linebackers, suffered a concussion on Monday. It is a short week. He would be sorely missed here, obviously. Just the vibe I'm getting here, Todd. This game has a far better chance closing pick than trending towards 3.
Yep, I can't argue similar sentiment out my way as well on that particular game. Real quick, when we look at the Raiders offense matched up against this Washington football team defense, I mean, Jonathan Allen continues to assert himself as a dominant force on the interior. You have to think that could be a problematic matchup for Raiders offensive line, not afraid to take countless holding penalties and put themselves behind the 8 ball. It also would appear that Darren Waller trending towards missing this game, if you believe Rick Bisaccia's comments, but at the same time, I think a lot of our listeners would find it interesting that it's not probably as big a downgrade to Foster Moreau as the casual fan believes.
Italians are trustworthy. That's one thing that you need to learn, my good man. Anyways.
Their word is their bond.
Waller is trending towards being out. Didn't miss a game in 19 or 20. Missed one game earlier this season. I believe it was back in week 7. Fabian Moreau is a more than fine replacement. In fact, I think he starts on the vast majority of teams in the NFL. He just happens to be behind Darren Waller. But if you go back to that week 7 game, the Raiders still had the 4th best EPA of the week without Darren Waller. Now, I know he's worth something to the spread. We just don't have a lot of data points without him. In the one we have, the Raiders more than survived offensively. But you do start to get that combination of Ruggs gone, Waller out, Deshaun Jackson turned 35 yesterday and is limited in practice so far this week. It kind of becomes an offense throwing underneath the Hunter Renfrow and hoping the good version of Bryan Edwards finally shows up. On paper, there is a mismatch up front. We know the Raiders' O-line would be a problem coming into the season. It has been, despite a pretty league average release time for Derek Carr. I believe it's like around 2.78 seconds. He's been pressured on almost 35% of his dropbacks. The Raiders are in the bottom third of the league in pass block win rate. Washington's defense top 10 in pass rush win rate. As you alluded to, most of that now comes from the interior with the 2 first-round picks. We saw a report from Jason Lockenfora on Thanksgiving morning about the Raiders wanting to get back to their ground game. They ran it 35 times against Dallas. The issue is the way you want to attack Washington is through the air, right? They're 7th in defensive rush efficiency, 5th in run-stop win rate, but 30th against the pass. And so
they have trended up in that direction, though, no?
A touch. Yes. In the last 2 weeks, they've figured out how to actually kind of marry the defense a little bit and not have complete blown coverages. That is very accurate. Yes. You also got Russell Wilson with one finger and his entire body out of the location of Seattle on Monday night. So obviously a massive defensive effort against Tom Brady in that offense as well. So you don't want to discredit what went on there. And then you obviously had Cam Newton in his first start in an offense not designed for him. So there is some,
noise.
The following week he went 5 for 21. So yes, slight improvement in the secondary. You give them credit for the Brady stuff, but the last 2 weeks, I think circumstance, yes. You, at its core, you want to beat Washington through the air, or that's how the way you would kind of devise a game plan to attack them. Overall, we do have the Raiders' offense kind of trending down, and I know what it looked like on Thanksgiving, and that was in front of a massive audience when everyone was on the couch watching the game if they hadn't slipped out due to all the tryptophan kicking in. Because everyone will think off that performance that their offense is back and humming, but it's just one data point, and I know it's the most recent one, but Derek Carr and the Raiders got a familiar defense, right? It was a Dan Quinn defense, and that's a style of defense they get to see every day at practice because Gus Bradley and Dan Quinn came from the same place in Seattle with cover 3 and cover 1 concepts. Since the bye week, though, the Raiders are 20th in EPA per play. A lot of that has to do with people now figuring out Bisaccia, as you mentioned, and the guy, that's taken over play calling for Gruden. And regardless of what we think of Gruden, fantastic play caller. Downgrade there, obviously. There is a well-respected bettor I know that went under 50 here, and that is why we have seen a trickle down. But again, it's that combination of weapons being out for the Raiders, defensive improvement for Washington, Raiders saying they want to be committed to the ground game a little bit more. So on the surface, it would appear as this over game, but there has been some sharp money at 50 on the under here.
Tough to go over totals in games where Washington's going to have at least one drive that takes up about 9 minutes, like we've seen in recent weeks, with how methodical they've been. Establishing Antonio Gibson, who had a career-high workload last week and it paid dividends, wasn't ultra-efficient, but his cumulative numbers were there and showed how dynamic he could be as a pass catcher coming out of the backfield. In a matchup that you highlighted on Monday's podcast, saying that Seattle was amongst the league worst in terms of covering running backs, and Washington heard it loud and clear, getting the ball to J.D. McKissic and Antonio Gibson in that 17-15 victory.
How many receptions did those two have?
I think Gibson
double digits combined.
Oh, for sure. I think Gibson ended up with 7. His over/under closed at FanDuel at 1.5, and I think J.D. McKissic's over/under was 3.5. You did have to sweat that a little bit longer. I think J.D. finished up with 5 in that particular spot, but McKissic was the beneficiary of getting into the end zone with a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown as well. When we look at the AFC North, I think this has been one of the more traditional rivalries that we've typically seen to decide the pecking order, one team trending in the wrong direction. It's the Ravens on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Baltimore, a 4.5-point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total on the game sits at 44. You have to love the drama coming out of the Steel City in the wake of a demolition at the hands of the Cincinnati Bengals. Chase Claypool, the new age face of the receiving corps, clamoring for music during practices, saying that's going to help the team's focus, while it drew the ire of the former Steeler offensive line greats like Ramon Foster and Alan Faneca. Meanwhile, you have Rocky Bleier coming out saying the team just sucks, and so much so that Mike Tomlin was forced to address some of those concerns. The Steelers swept the season series from the Ravens last year. The Ravens did play the second meeting without Lamar Jackson, and it felt like a lion's share of their team on a weird weeknight game. But when you go back and you look at the Week 8 meeting, the Steelers actually were dominated despite getting a 24-20 win, outgaining that contest 457-221. It was Lamar Jackson's turnover problem that was their undoing. Lamar was pretty open and honest with his own criticism of his performance on Sunday night, saying he's got to be better protecting the football. Maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, a group that potentially or should be without TJ Watt, can be the perfect cure-all to get this Ravens offense healthy, a group that's really struggled in recent weeks.
Rocky Bleier came to the conclusion that Pittsburgh sucks when he saw Baltimore favored by 4.5 on the road, and it's a very good conclusion to draw.
Yeah, I mean, I can't sit well with those Steeler greats when they find Pittsburgh as a home underdog of more than a field goal in a game against one of their more traditional rivals.
We knew the offense would be average at best, but the defense, I think, is what is concerning, and it's something that we've really been banging the drum this season about Pittsburgh being extremely washed out and a total shell of itself on defense, and that's been for a while, right? The other thing we preach is early downs being the most predictive indicator for success. And when you're looking at Baltimore's offense and the Steelers' defense, it's a complete mismatch, and this may shock some people. Pittsburgh's dead last in defensive efficiency on first down. And even with Lamar missing a game and then throwing 4 picks last week, Baltimore's a top 10 offense on first down. This feels like a little different matchup than we've seen in years past when you don't have the bulk up front that we have like routinely mentioned that Pittsburgh's lost over the years. Like it hurts in a matchup like this. We know Hargrave gone. Tuitt seems to be out for the year. Dupree moved on in free agency. Tyson Alualu out. Watt most likely out. We haven't seen someone that's been on the COVID list right in kind of the middle of the week end up playing this year, I don't believe. Whether it's a trade, free agency, illness, injury, the Steelers' front is just not that good right now. And then on the back end, Joe Hayden missed practice. You lost depth guys in free agency at corner. All signs point to Lamar bouncing back here. We obviously shared this last week, but we have the data that shows quarterbacks missing a week due to illness struggle the following week, right? There's certain quarterback production data that can dip as much as 18% the week after missing because of illness over the last 10 years of sample that we've had it. So we're projecting a far better effort from Lamar and the Ravens offense. And you have this division game, right? Like physical, December game, cold, Heinz Field, all of the narrative stuff. But the Ravens are number 1 in the league in rushing yard differential over opponent per game. The Steelers are 31st. And so I think the Ravens have a real advantage offensively here, Todd, because they're going to be the more physical team at the point of attack. And then ultimately, when you open things up because you've had great success on early downs, Lamar's going to have more favorable throwing situations against a secondary that's a little bit beat up.
Let me put some of those numbers that you mentioned for the Steelers in a historical context. They've allowed 40-plus points in back-to-back games for the first time since 1989 at 41 points per game. They're allowing more than 450 yards per game. The pressure rate is non-existent at 16%. They've allowed 130-plus rushing yards in 4 straight games for the first time since 1999. No Steelers defense has ever allowed 130-plus rushing yards in 5 straight games since the merger. When you look at the Steelers, since holding the Browns to 96 yards rushing in Week 8, the Steelers have given up an average of more than 180 per game to the next 4 opponents. The Steelers allowing 4.8 yards per carry this season. It's the worst mark in franchise history. So where there's smoke, there's fire, and this is a defense right now, to your points, that is completely below average. If that defense continues to struggle, Payne, do you see enough firepower offensively from this team to get something out of the passing game, knowing you can't run against this Ravens front, but there are some opportunities for big plays if you're able to throw the football?
This is why I truly like doing this. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, he sounds Payne doing these podcasts. It's a lot of work. And no, it's just kind of how I speak. But the reason I love doing these is very monotone. We enjoy doing these. I don't give a shit about the best bet, right? Like we're going to win those long term. But, we're the only content space that gets judged on, a 13-second best bet, not the actual content. But speaking of which, there are movies pat ourselves on the back.
There are movies that win Academy Awards whose endings suck, and they're given the highest accolades out there. You're in the theater for 2 hours. The 5-minute resolution is garbage. Everything else is Academy Award winning worthy. And we got to. You know what? I like that approach. We got to spin the space that way.
But with it, literally, this is the only podcast content space that doesn't get judged on entertainment, information, the ability to get smarter. It's just. You see guys, they leave like 1-star reviews. It's like, the 13 seconds wasn't good enough for me one week.
That's what she said.
Where I'm kind of going with this is like, remember we did the Monday night preview that was Bears-Steelers? and we kind of called for this. So it's like, we don't want to be the guys who are like, oh, the Steelers defense sucks because we've watched them give up 41 back-to-back weeks. Like, no, we kind of saw this unfolding in the metrics when we did the Monday night breakdown against the Bears, and we're like, there's going to be some areas where, rookie quarterback can have some success here who hasn't really had success much this year. And that's exactly what we saw. And then you get like, Jared Goff and weather, and they only give up 16 points in overtime, so it kind of masks for a week that the Pittsburgh defense really stinks. And I don't like tipping my hand here, but I'll give a nice little nugget. But it's like, if you look at like the EPA metrics when TJ Watt is on the field versus off, even this year when we're already talking about like a downgraded defense, it goes from like being like, top 10 to like bottom 5. It's a massive drop off a cliff. So if TJ Watt is ultimately announced out, this game's probably going to 6.
I mean, the reality of it is he is a one-man wrecking crew up front, and when the Steelers don't like to blitz and you can't manufacture natural pressure, the proof is in the pudding, and this could be a matchup where they struggle immensely. I don't want to say it's the final nail in the Steelers' coffin, but it very much could be for a team that overachieved for a stretch earlier this year. Trends be damned. I know Big Ben has been outstanding as a home underdog, but when you go into a gunfight with a knife, sometimes it's tough to try and compete, and we'll see the Ravens look to put a nail in the Steelers' coffin here. I
did ignore your question. Do we want to touch on the offense just briefly?
I mean, if you feel there's anything to add, otherwise,
yeah,
I mean, I feel like we've
quick.
highlighted the biggest mismatch in this game that I think a lot of the casual listeners out there wouldn't understand is going to be as pronounced as the way you've laid out the case.
Yes, I will go quickly here, but I see in your notes, and we kind of talked off air, it's about like the Steelers' ground game kind of being out of sync the last couple weeks, but really what happened is it got going because they faced a Bears defensive front that was missing its 2 best defensive linemen, a Lions defense who's bottom 3rd in the league in defensive rush efficiency, and when they played each other, it was bottom 5, and then you got the Chargers run defense, which is dead last in the NFL. So that was the reason for kind of the spike in run game performance from Pittsburgh. I don't see a situation where the ground game gets going here, so you're going into it saying, hey, this is all Big Ben.
Good
and
luck.
So what that means is Wink Martindale can kind of unleash his pass rushers. Ravens, despite their defense being down and in terms of efficiency being the worst Ravens defense since 2006, they are still 4th in pressure rate, number 1 in blitz rate. Big Ben has an 11% turnover-worthy throw rate when pressured this season and a 47 passer rating. Hasn't been good against the blitz either, 77 passer rating there. And so this becomes the ultimate battle. Pressure versus Big Ben's release time and getting it out quickly. Ben does a good job to negate pressure and help an offensive line that isn't very good. He's got the shortest time to throw, 2.4 seconds. If he can get it out, there's going to be some opportunity against the Ravens defense that is struggling in coverage. They're 24th in defensive pass efficiency. So that's the ultimate battle on this side of the ball is, can Ben get it out before the pressure gets there? If the pressure gets there, he's going to make mistakes, but there could be some opportunities there for Deontay Johnson, for a Chase Claypool, if Ben gets it out on time. And I think ultimately, you think Ravens, Steelers, again, like this, division game, it's like, 1st to 20. Could be a little bit of a different vibe here, and there has been some professional money over the 43, as stunning as that may sound to some for a Ravens-Steelers game.
I'm not going to lie, one final thing on this game, and you talk about it more in college than we do in pros, not knowing the rankings, not necessarily knowing teams' records. I had no idea that if the season ended today, the Ravens would be the number 1 seed in the AFC, because they've looked anything but the best team in that conference, and I was kind of blown away when I dug into that handicapping this contest.
Yeah, they've battled.
So we'll see exactly what happens there. As far as the Broncos and Chiefs, it's a game flexed into the Sunday night time slot. We'll get to that in just a second, but want to encourage all of you, our loyal listeners, to follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod, and go to Apple Podcasts. Rate, review, subscribe. 5-star reviews, always appreciated. You guys are the ones that we produce this content for, and we love the interaction and the feedback. You help provide the driver to get this in front of more eyeballs each and every week throughout the football season. Broncos, Payne, 9.5-point underdogs at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total on the game of 47.5 as they'll make their annual trip into Arrowhead. When you look at the Chiefs, they've dominated the Broncos. Won 11 straight meetings. It's one game behind the Patriots' dominance of the Jets for the longest mastery over one team in the National Football League. In those games, Denver has been outscored 29+ to 13. So you're talking about a 16-point average margin of victory. Andy Reid off the bye. Let's get this out there before we get into the game. 19-3 straight up, 14-7-1 against the spread in his career with extra time to prepare. The Broncos, one of the league's best under teams this season, going 9-2 under the total. Their games have averaged less than 39 points per contest. And when you talk about one guy that you want to be backing when he's on the road and as an underdog, Teddy Bridgewater fits that bill. 42-19 against the spread in his career. On the road, 24-5 as a road underdog. Those numbers get even better. 19-3 against the spread. And in a limited sample size, when he's catching 8 points or more, 5-0 against the number. I give you all of that to say, Payne, if the Broncos are going to be successful in this game, I don't think it has anything to do with Teddy Bridgewater. It's all about getting the ground game on track against this Kansas City defense.
Yeah, I could certainly see that. We've seen improvement from the Chiefs defense, and a lot of it is that's kind of the hesitation, right? Like, is the Broncos offense going to get going here, right? And I think, when we've looked at the Chiefs and they've gone from a schedule-adjusted dead last efficiency rating to below average. And I mean, through the first 5 weeks, it was, the 31st ranked defense and then 30 feet of like sludge and shit and then Kansas City's defense. We called for improvement. And since week 6, the Chiefs are 6th in EPA per play allowed, 7th in success rate allowed. If you look at their weighted defense, it's now 16th in efficiency. This is exactly what we thought they were. Like, they just need to be average. On the season, the Chiefs have also played the third toughest schedule of offenses. And now you get Denver. And it's a league average offense. The Broncos have faced the second easiest schedule of defenses. Spags has 2 weeks to prepare. I know it's a different quarterback running the show with Teddy B, but the Chiefs shut down Pat Shurmur's offense last season. In the 2 meetings, Denver had a 29% success rate and averaged 4.9 yards an attempt in the Week 7 game during non-garbage time. Then in Week 13, Denver was held to a 43% passing success rate and 5.4 an attempt. Locke turned it over twice. Remember, Andy Reid knows everything about Pat Shurmur. It was Reid who gave him a chance in Philly, made Shurmur his tight ends and O-line coach. Edge typically goes to master and mentor and not the pupil. Specific to this game, Teddy Bridgewater isn't going to be 100%. Derwin James crushed him last week. He's dealing with a lower body shin injury. He's going to battle through it. Now the positive is Garrett Bowles is back in the building today. Should be in a couple hours. That will probably break. He's likely a go. Getting your left tackle back is huge. Right tackle Bobby Massey has been out since week 9. He got in a limited practice on Wednesday, so trending in the right direction. Dalton Reisner did go down in the Chargers game, didn't return. Let's monitor that situation a little bit. The Broncos, to your point, have to get the ground game going. The Chiefs can be somewhat susceptible to runs from 3 wide receiver sets. Now, Pat Shurmur isn't like the most creative, and he doesn't disguise things overly well, so the Broncos are 70% pass from 3 wide. Maybe run it a little bit more from 3 wide. I do think it could make some sense to go with more 2 tight end sets in this game. Get Fant and Albert O lined up together. The Chiefs have allowed a 77% of tight end targets to be caught for 11.8 yards a catch. They've also given up 6 touchdowns, the Chiefs, to tight ends. So that is not the best linebacker coverage unit, although Willie Gay is certainly increased the productivity and coverage there a little bit. He's a guy that can move sideline to sideline. But overall, I think this comes down to Teddy's health. We know Spags likes to blitz. Lots of exotic pressures. 31% blitz rate for the Chiefs, 7th most in the league. Teddy's been great against the blitz. 132 passer rating, 89% adjusted accuracy, 10 yards an attempt. So I'm sure Spags will test Teddy's mobility early, see if that shin is a problem. We saw him just limping around out there in the entire second half when he did return. But if he makes the Chiefs pay, then Spags likely backs off some of the pressure, but I think he's going to try it early. In general, Denver's just kind of this methodical offense, 30th in pace, 30th in first half pace, 29th in neutral situation pace. They're just a snail. Denver survived by being good on third and fourth down, although they don't go for it much on fourth down. 7th in efficiency in those situations. Kansas City defensively, though, that's when they've been best. Getting you to third down, playing with a small and fast defense as opposed to having more linebackers on the field. Something has to give on that down. Another thing, situationally, Denver hasn't been great in the red zone, bottom 7 in the league, converting red zone trips into touchdowns. Partly why we have seen this under come in because Teddy Bridgewater's banged up a little bit. They play at such a snail's pace. They're going to try to get the ground game going. And then when they have been successful on offense, they're settling for 3 more than punching in for 7.
Can this finally be the free Javonte Williams game? I mean, it's truly been a backfield timeshare between him and Melvin Gordon all year. The only team in the NFL that has 2 running backs that average at least 10 carries a game would be the Green Bay Packers. But we see the burst and the big play potential. We saw it on full display from Javonte as a receiver against the Chargers. I know Melvin Gordon dealing with some lower body injuries, but somewhere along the way, you have to let the explosive rookie work up a lather and make him the bell cow, no?
I'm a big Javonte guy. I would have handed him the keys to the car a little bit earlier. Now, in saying that, Melvin Gordon's been pretty efficient this year, better than I thought he would be. Maybe it's because he's a little more lighter and aerodynamic. He gave himself a haircut, probably shed about 4 or 5 pounds, got himself in better shape physically as well, and so he has been good. So you don't want to remove anything from his workload. If you're looking at some of the efficiency stuff, I think in their minds they want to be a run-first team and they want both backs fresh, and so they're kind of changing things up. But now you're down the home stretch, right? And as crazy as it sounds, the Broncos are playing for first place this week. And so you probably want to get your best back to the ball, and I do believe that is Javonte.
Other side of the ball for Kansas City, we've seen their offense kind of morph. The big plays this year, not as plentiful as they've been in the past. They're tied for 18th in the league for plays that have covered 25-plus yards. We know what Patrick Mahomes has done in his illustrious career against his division mates, 17-3 straight up, more than 31 points per game, a touchdown-interception ratio of 43-10. But his passer rating in recent weeks has been held well below his normally high standards. He's produced a 91 or less in 6 out of 7 games. Tyreek Hill's volume has been there. The big plays have not. Travis Kelce, something similar. The strength of this Denver defense is their secondary. How do we see that matchup playing out and when Kansas City has the ball going up against Denver's defensive front?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think everyone's kind of waiting to see what it looks like out of the bye for Kansas City. You know, they've survived this downswing and are only 1 game out of first place in the AFC, and Buffalo and New England play each other twice. To your point, Baltimore's in first place but has not looked themselves. The Titans are free-falling and dealing with a slew of injuries. So Kansas City's alive here, and they probably shouldn't be. No one just deaded them. They're here. Having the late season bye even, right, to kind of tweak and implement things for the new looks defenses have been giving them is huge because they may come out with something completely different here. KC is already more set up to kind of beat the style of defense that has given them trouble with that too high shell look, right? The right tackle position got healthy again. Looks like Lucas Niang is back. And then Long, who they signed as kind of a long-term idea this season, right? Veteran, didn't want to quite retire, has enough in the tank, has been injured. He is now practicing in full. So that right tackle situation should be fine. And then obviously Edwards-Helaire is back as well. So if you want to go to that too high shell or you want to play a 4-2-5 or a 3-2-6, we're okay handing it off to Clyde Edwards-Helaire now and have him pick up 4, 5, 6 yards a pop. Now for this matchup, stylistically, Fangio is the type of defense that has given Kansas City trouble this season, right? It's that shell, that dome-style defense. Vic likes to switch from the aforementioned, right, 4-2-5, the 3-2-6 throughout the game. Make KC hand it off or throw short, protect against the explosive, have more bodies in the intermediate throwing windows for Mahomes to read. And that's kind of the goal of his defense. The question for me is, does Vic actually have the horses? Right? Broncos are 26th in defensive rush efficiency. Again, a healthy KC O-line and running back that can make some hay on the ground. Even with Surtain and Simmons, it's still a below-average coverage unit, and Denver has played a below-average schedule of offenses, and that'll surprise some people. I know health is starting to improve for Denver. Got Bradley Chubb back last week to help with some of the natural pressure stuff. Bryce Callahan is returning soon, but I think it might be too soon this week. We'll
I didn't see him listed as
back.
Yeah, I think I'd be stunned if he was back. I don't even know if he was activated off IR yet.
Yeah, he's trending towards being back here in the next couple of weeks, but I think this week is too soon. But any offense Denver's faced that's 20th or better in overall efficiency, they've allowed 52% of plays in those games to grade successful. Kansas City is the best offense Denver has faced this season, despite the perception, right? And that's kind of what I've been talking about. Buffalo goes from the 6th best offense to the 19th, and no one says anything. The Chiefs go from like number 1 or number 2 down to 6th, and the entire world's having a coronary about it. So the perception is, right, like that this offense completely sucks. It doesn't suck. It's just not as elite as it was in prior years. So this is still a step up in class for the Denver defense against Reed off the bye. So there's also some potential for things that Denver hasn't quite seen on tape yet. Natural pressure is always the key against Kansas City and Mahomes. So again, like Bradley Chubb being back is big, but Denver's 27th in pass rush win rate. The vast majority of the Broncos' pressure comes from the blitz. Vic blitzes at the 9th highest rate. We know that does not work against Mahomes. He will kill you. Now, you do like the fact that Denver is top 10 in both counting stats and efficiency defending tight ends. Probably going to have to be a team effort against Kelsey since Denver doesn't really have a guy that can man him. Maybe it's bracket coverage with a man and then some safety help. Maybe Denver relies on Caden Stearns, but he's allowed 79% of targets to be caught for 15 yards of reception. He's only 6 foot, 205 pounds, so I'm not sure he's strong enough to defend Kelsey. It's very clear when you go back and look at some of the recent history in these matchups, it's feast or famine defending Kelsey. He's either going for double-digit catches against the Broncos or Casey's using him as the decoy. It's really interesting to watch. Let's see what Fangio comes up with because, again, this is a game where it may shock some people, where they are playing for first place in the division. And Denver's defense is going to have to show well here because I'm not sure exactly what the offense does. But you had Justin Simmons come out and talk about the importance of this game, said it's the biggest in his 6 years in Denver since first place is on the line. We've seen this come off the 10, okay? So let's kind of phrase it this way. We've seen it come off the 10. Denver is going to be the sharp side at 10. Could get some offensive line reinforcements back with Bulls and Massey. And Denver doesn't really turn it over. So there's, the potential for not having some short fields, and Kansas City has shown a propensity to turn it over. So I understand like that money. For me, I'd rather watch this come down and use Kansas City in a teaser leg personally. Right, if you can get it below the 7 and the 3 on a 6-pointer, if it eventually gets there, before I'm running to take like 10 minus 20 on Denver at this point.
Forget Denver playing for first place. Denver's got 6 games to get 3 more victories. That's all we care about around these parts.
Yes, that is true.
So should be an interesting game to see what Kansas City comes out with from the bye week. To your point, we know Andy Reid is one of the best with extra time to prepare, so we'll see how much more dynamic this offense looks. One game is still left to go, but before we get to the Thursday night breakdown between the Saints and Cowboys, it's always fun to introduce a fresh perspective into the podcast. He joins us every Thursday here on the Bet the Board podcast. You can follow John Sheeran on Twitter at JSheeran. That's JSheeran 1981. And John, we want to make sure you're rested and recharged after your Thanksgiving bye week around these parts.
Yeah, 100%. It was nice to have Thanksgiving football and all of the trimmings that go with it last week. So, we're back to the grind after a 4-day weekend for sure.
So we were having a discussion before we jumped on, the three of us, and I think our listeners would be entertained by it, talking about the over-under that should be set for a, let's call it a grown adult male. Let's go in the 35-plus range. Payne, I think that includes you, right? Or do we have to go a little bit younger?
I'm not divulging my age.
If we try and set the proper distance for where you could go out on a, whether it's a high school football field, college, NFL, what have you, to kick a field goal, do we think 33.5 yards, Payne? That was the number you came up with. I said I like the under. Maybe we should ask the professional and John where he's going to set that price if we can potentially get the FanDuel team to go out there and partake in this little endeavor.
I think it depends on some of the parameters, right? If you give John and the guys an hour to warm up and kick 50 balls, I'm setting the number substantially higher than what it is if they just get one little warm-up crack and then the official thing. So we gotta iron out the details here before I set a number. But I think the proper one's probably in that 33.5, 34.5 range if it's just one warm-up kick and then we get the one that actually is factored in. And they're also in New York, so we got to think about the weather. It's starting to cool off a little bit there. Ball is tougher to kick, so there's a lot of elements we got to incorporate here, but I think we should make this happen.
Yeah,
John, you got the power in the cloud, my friend. You're going to be able to pull this off for us and entertain our Bet the Board listeners. I mean, this has all the potential to be the best viral content we've ever done in 5+ years and more than 400 episodes of shows.
That's a pretty low bar, isn't it? Literally and figuratively, I guess.
You've heard us. We're quite boring, John.
Yeah, look, you were quite kind to us by saying a middle-aged male. I would have put it more along the lines of a 40-year-old fat Irish man. So, yeah, the bit of soccer I think will help us. But, yeah, I think it's a debate we've been having after work on a few occasions around how far we can make one from. So we're going to try and make it happen. We'll set the parameters and let Payne set the line and hopefully take a few dollars off them when we manage to get some footage of it.
Payne, when this eventually takes place,
I may have to fix this thing, right? Like we may have to. The parameters may be set, right? What time are you doing this? Are you coming directly from the bar? So if you're lubed up a little bit, things change.
We may have to pony up a couple of cases of their finest adult beverage to the winner so they can pile it up. I mean, they may need 30 or 60 to try and nurse some of those hamstrings back to health. But I'm almost entertained, Payne, by the prospect of trying to encourage our listeners to go out there on their local football fields and try this and send in the video as well to see, if Bet the Board is an athletic fan base or if we're talking about, like John said, that 40+ drunken crowd that may or may not be able to live up to some of these feats of strength or accomplish athletic endeavors at this juncture of their life.
You potentially missed the first wave, right? Everybody had their turkey bowl last week, so maybe you can get them to drum up another game for Christmas with friends and family, and maybe they'll submit some video then.
All right, we'll have to work on it, so we'll throw that out there to any of you, our loyal listeners, who are going, what the hell are these idiots talking about? If you want to send in a video of you attempting to kick a field goal at any length, we'll see if we can come up with a unique prize for anybody that actually makes it. But, John, when we look back on Thanksgiving weekend, of course, we saw a major upset take place with the Dallas Cowboys losing outright to the Las Vegas Raiders while all of us were sitting down to our meals. We've seen a season that's continued to see home favorites really struggle and underdogs have their day. Safe to assume that it was another rough weekend for the general betting public that we saw transpire?
Yeah, it really was. Like you say, like we said, I think the Browns and Ravens game was really the nail in the coffin. I think the idea and narrative around the 89 points from last season meant that we had an awful lot of SGP volume in it, and the game playing out the way that it did was really kind of the cherry on top for the Bucs over the weekend. So yeah, I mean, outside of that kind of 3-week stretch in the middle of the season so far, and the rest of it's been a bit of a massacre for customers. And I'm just hoping everybody's, sticking with us and betting sensibly, and hopefully it turns and everybody gets more money back in their wallets with a view towards January and the postseason, because it's been really tough on bettors out there, I would say, in general.
Payne, do you ever remember a season quite like this where we've seen underdogs and unders come home at such a high clip? I mean, I'm trying to think back over the last 5 to 7 years since we've been doing this, and I don't ever remember seeing these kind of trends emerge this late in the season.
Without divulging too much, I would say I'm more familiar on the total side of things. It doesn't necessarily shock me, right? We had an anomaly last season where no one was playing in front of fans. Offenses could kind of operate without noise, and we saw a massive adjustment last year, which I know we were kind of ahead of the market on the first 4 or 5 weeks, but you had average totals week 1 last year in that like 46 range, and by week 5 it was 51. And there were points aplenty, and now I can tell you virtually every week, even this week, right? You just run your model on Sunday night and it's spitting out a ton more unders than overs. So it doesn't shock me specifically to the over and under trends that you've mentioned.
No, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, I know that's one of the more pronounced trends, especially with some of those standalone games. We've seen a rash of unders, and it's always interesting to try and figure out when the market reaches an equilibrium point that you're going to create some two-way action, but it appeared to have one-way traffic largely between Seattle and Washington. And we're curious to see where, John, you guys get bet in tonight's Cowboys-Saints game amid all the speculation about who may or may not be healthy for the Saints, and of course what the Cowboys play calling will look like, maybe better without Mike McCarthy to get in the way of Kellen Moore. But Payne, I'll let you fire away the hard questions for John and see where they've seen some of the action coming in for the weekend.
Well, I saw John's tweet, so let's start there. Not a fan of Mike McCarthy?
I think that's a pretty big fan club. Yeah, but we're up there. We're up there at the top of VP of that supporters club because, yeah, I think, to Todd's point, feels like he just gets in the way continually. Kellen Moore's obviously done a really excellent job catching everybody's eye the last couple of seasons, and I think the offense, now that they look to be a little bit more healthy this week, it may actually benefit them, and that was kind of the sentiment of the tweet. We made the game 4.5. It's obviously trending towards Dallas as well. I think we might be sitting at 5 as we record right now. So decent interest there. I'm still interested in it personally. I think this is a get-right game for Dallas. I think, they'll use a lot of the backs in the flat, I think, and with the receivers back healthy, I think it'll be an awful lot to expect the Saints secondary to cover that all the time. And I kind of like Pollard's receiving yards as well. I liked it last week more on the idea that they were down receivers and down potentially Zeke a bit more banged up than we knew about, but tonight feels like a good way not to run up the middle against New Orleans, who we know are pretty stout, and I think you'll see a decent amount of that maybe from the backfield. So pretty interested in Dallas. Like I said, I think this is a get-right game for them, and that's the way the money's been trending as well.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you next, because we saw early in the week there was some money that came in on Dallas, and then the McCarthy news dropped, and all of the 6 and 6.5 went away. Did see a group take the points, and we settled back in yesterday around 4, and to your point, now we're back around 5, and it looks like the injury situation is going to favor Dallas. Especially, it looks like DeMarcus Lawrence will be in the fold defensively as well. Transitioning to Sunday Night Football, Denver and Kansas City. It's an interesting game. Want to get your take on this. I know you guys have been a little bit higher on the Chiefs than the market. If I go back and remember correctly, you guys made the Sunday Night Football game against the Raiders 3.5, while the market was dealing 2.5. You were proven correct. What are you seeing on this game for Sunday Night Football? I know we've seen some, movement on the total from 49.5 to 47. Did you get hit with that as well?
We were pretty quick to move it. We only made it 46.5, so we were keeping a close eye on it. Like you said, the market opened at 49.5, but we were pretty quick, as I said, to get down. So we would have dodged the vast majority of the sharper money on the total on the under in that game. In terms of the side, yeah, I think the public have definitely favored Kansas City so far. I expect to see a continued trend that way, particularly after a performance in the last couple of weeks. We've been high on them in certain spots. This is not that spot. We have this game closer to 8. We're shading Denver and the under even at current prices as well. So this feels like a lot of points. I'm not sure everything is 100% fixed in Kansas City and Denver, and we know what Fangio's defense can do in particular. So I think they'll make this difficult enough for Kansas. I expect Kansas to obviously go and win the game eventually, but I'd be surprised if Denver don't hang around inside the number.
Makes complete sense. And I guess as we see this trend off the 10 and go to 9.5, is there a hesitancy to maybe get to an 8 and open up that teaser window on Kansas City?
Yeah, I don't think it's something we'd be necessarily totally against. Our numbers make it close to that anyway. So, like I said, we're shading Denver already, and I think we'll continue to do it for, at least another point. I'm not too concerned really about teasers. Sure, you can get a good spot in it with this one in particular, but overall, the over-rounds are pretty heavily in our favor. So, yeah, there'll be people out there who'll spot those couple of gaps every now and then around the Wong teasers. But outside of that, we're never really going to make a decision on our number based around concern for that specifically.
Makes complete sense. I didn't know if that mindset changed at all with it being a primetime game. Another one at the 4:00 slate is Baltimore and Pittsburgh. We've seen some early movement on the Ravens, some of that injury related to the Steelers and TJ Watt. What are you guys seeing on that one?
Yeah, I mean, our number's much higher. I think the market opened somewhere around 3.5. We're 5.5 on this game, and shading Baltimore nicely. I think from an X&O perspective, this game matches up really well for Baltimore. I think this is the spot where, some of the defense, I think if you take away, if you have Humphrey and take away maybe Claypool and Najee, obviously, in terms of his efficiency this season has been very good, but this feels like a tough team to run the ball against with him, particularly if they focus on him and try and let them beat them in the passing game, particularly when you take away one of their best receivers. And I think Baltimore will have success on the ground in this game as well. I think, TJ Watt, I think he's got to be very, very unlikely to play at this stage. And, when you take him away, I think you'll see more success, maybe short passing in the game than we've seen from the Ravens the last couple of weeks, and put them in better spots for second and third down. So I'd be surprised if Baltimore don't win and cover here.
Makes complete sense. And before I pass the baton back to Todd, anything else that stands out to you in terms of games you like, sharp money you've taken, or liability that the books will be obviously rooting for, side or total this weekend?
Yeah, there's been interesting money for New York. We saw the Daniel Jones, or for against New York, we saw the Daniel Jones news break, obviously, and a couple of our sharper customers were quick to jump on 3 and 3.5. Interesting bit of disagreement internally around where it should go. Some guys feel 6 and some guys feel like that's too many. We're anywhere between 3 if Jones was to play and 5.5 if he doesn't. So I expect it to kind of sit around the top end of that, around 5.5, maybe even as far as 6 come kickoff. And I think a lot of people will jump on the Dolphins. The other interesting one has definitely been New England. We saw sharp money for New England on the money line. And at +3 early in the week. It's at 2.5 or so, closer maybe even just to 3 right now, but we made it 2.5 as well. The weather is obviously a watch there. I know people have spoken about the wind and how that might impact Mark Jones's arm in particular, or maybe lack thereof. But that feels like a really interesting game for Sunday. Or for Monday, actually. It'd be interesting to see how the Patriots do here. I think this is a good acid test for them, and they've obviously been excellent the last couple of weeks. It'd be unbelievably good to see them continue that trend, I guess, and get another W.
John, when you bring up the Patriots, how aggressive have you guys been going about changing some of their pricing, whether it's big picture in the futures market or on a week-to-week basis? I believe it was Football Outsiders that gives them, I want to say, a 25% probability or some really large number to either get to the Super Bowl or win the AFC. Clearly, it's a team with a coaching pedigree we know all too well, but still a very inexperienced quarterback, albeit one that's asserted himself as far as the front runner in this year's Offensive Rookie of the Year race.
Yeah, I think it's the old, I was going to say it's the old Patriots. Clearly, it's not the old Patriots, but I kind of meant the old idea of, Belichick betting himself in through the season, particularly in the early few games. It's not unusual to see, Belichick hide stuff off tape, particularly in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. And I think that's compounded by the idea that you've got a rookie quarterback in Mac Jones who he probably wanted to bet in, probably gave him simplistic game plans and asked him to do very little outside his comfort zone. And I think that was kind of what we saw from the Patriots. And then defensively, they've just gotten healthier throughout the entire season, and they're just playing really good football now, and they're obviously always been really well coached. So I think we're higher on them now than we were at the start of the season. I don't know that they've necessarily answered all of the questions we have against them, and our ratings are definitely increasing, but maybe not as aggressively as you might think. So we found ourselves in spots where we maybe haven't favored them so far this season, but I think this game will be kind of the information that we need to understand how serious a competitor the New England Patriots are. They look really good. Obviously, they haven't really taken their foot off the pedal lately, and this is the game, I think, where we'll find out how good they really are.
Yeah, definitely an interesting few weeks for them, with 2 dates against the Bills and a contest against the Indianapolis Colts as well. One last game I did want to get your take on. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the show, and I think, John, you've aligned with Payne and I in terms of this team being overrated, the market now finally catching up to them. It, of course, is the Los Angeles Chargers. We've seen the Bengals take some money from the early look-ahead lines at FanDuel. This number now trending, as high as 3.5 or towards a 3.5 in some shops. I mean, have you guys felt pretty aggressive in downgrading the Chargers each week as we see a larger and larger sample size for what this team can't do, despite Brandon Staley being lauded as the greatest thing since sliced bread on the sidelines after just 4 weeks there?
Yeah, I think Staley's interesting because I don't know that they've been that well coached recently. Obviously, everybody was really impressed at the start of the year, and I think a lot of that probably came down to Herbert. There was a lot of third and fourth down conversions from long yardage that you would have pinned absolutely entirely on Justin Herbert, and I think that probably led to an inflated view of Staley. And again this week, we've seen a line that we really can't make sense of, but this time we think it's on the Bengals. We only made this line 2. It's gone from 3 to almost 3.5, trending that way, and we'll be pretty aggressive in our stance against the Bengals here and actually like the Chargers this week. But like you said, I think there's been difference in view through the season. The first 4 weeks, it was the best thing since sliced bread, and since then, it maybe hasn't been as good, but I think between the Chargers being down in everybody's view and the Bengals off the back of a really big, impressive win, maybe being a little too high, we just couldn't get the number as far as where it sits. So definitely favoring the Chargers this weekend for once.
It's outstanding perspective, John, and we can't thank you enough for all that you offer up and the candid look from behind the counter, your own opinions that you're able to interject as well. Encourage all of our listeners to follow John on Twitter at JSheeran1981. And John, make sure you stretch. If it's going to be below 40 degrees, you get the hip flexor into it. You kind of do some rotations. So you make sure that core is ready to go. And we fully expect you to be able to land a field goal from at least 40 plus. But the problem with that is there's a good chance the Jets or Giants may offer you a 10-day contract. And I'm not sure that's a responsibility that you want to take on anytime soon.
At my age, I'll take anything going, Todd.
You got it, John. Best of luck this weekend, my friend.
Thanks, guys.
Man, Payne, just thinking about John getting out there trying to kick field goals in frigid weather, being all bundled up, like 27, 28 degrees at a local New Jersey high school. I mean, I think that's got all the potential for great branding.
That'd be awesome to watch. And I have no idea how many people in the FanDuel crew that he has. He's talked about them hanging out after work and going to the pub. And so there's a lot of elements there that I'm going to have to factor in to set a line here on the longest field goal. But they are all former soccer players. And so that is going to be a factor. But if they're drunk soccer players and we're only giving them one warm-up, that does change things.
It definitely helps the dynamic a little bit. I'm just thrilled that my fiance, who tried to attempt that feat, did not break her ankle at MetLife Stadium on Wednesday night when she was there as part of a gaming event, because I didn't need to wheel her around our house. That's probably not the most handicap accessible.
You are becoming that woman from Seinfeld. My fiance. Has anyone seen My Fiance? I didn't count this, but just by memory, over under 5.5 fiance bomb drops, and we are not even lunchtime noon Eastern yet.
Is it really that high?
It's a good sign that this is going to work.
No, I got a
good sign that I'm not.
I can't be that guy.
Now
that you've brought it to
after like 2.5 years,
you've brought it to my attention. Now I have to remove it from my vernacular, and we will clean things up going forward. I know she doesn't actually listen to the podcast, so I could probably get away with saying whatever the hell I wanted on these fine airwaves.
By the way, I thought I was being very nice, responding to one of her tweets for the first time. And she didn't even know the movie reference. So when she gets back in town, you're going to have to sit her down now that we don't have the college football podcast for a couple weeks and watch Unnecessary Roughness with her. We
go through this all the time, and it makes it most apparent the difference in our age when I make movie references, sports or otherwise. And she goes, nope, never seen it. Nope, never seen it. It drives me absolutely nuts. But if it's a show on Bravo or E, My 1,000 Pound Sisters or Below Deck, I mean, you can't slip one by her in that particular manner.
The battle you're going to have is that she is substantially younger. So you're going to need to figure out when you get to like 50 how to get a boat. Because you're going to need a boat, I think, to keep her around.
Well,
Are you a big boat guy or no?
I have never been a big boat guy. Lake Mead doesn't have the same appeal anymore than Havasu does. I mean, if you decide that when you buy your massive estate, somewhere along one of the many multitude of waterways down in South Florida, and you want to build a casita, I'm happy to contribute, 10% towards a boat that I can use. I'll clean it for you. You can use it on the weekends during high traffic areas like Art Basel going on this weekend. And, I'll take it out on like a Tuesday afternoon for 90 minutes with a jitney.
Not bad. We'll let you take the boat out. It'll be on maybe like the Jupiter water. Maybe Tiger will stop by and teach you some improvements for your short game, and that's a deal. We'll have to chip in on the boat.
Speaking of Tiger, what a depressing press conference earlier this week, letting him, come to grips with his mortality as an athlete. Although one thing I will say, dude looked jacked when he sat down for that presser. Looked bigger. I'm not sure if it's all muscle or he's been putting on some extra weight, but always tough to see, one of the greats in the sports realize that his best days are clearly behind him.
Yes, that was sad to watch. And the interviewer that asked him a question, asked him something, and then Tiger's response was like, I almost lost my leg. And then the interviewer was like, started to break down a little bit, and he's like, oh, I forgot my second question.
Yeah, it tells you when something's a little bit hard-hitting there when you try and address, when you see the invincibility of athletes no matter what sport, and then you see them when they get into the twilight of their career, when they deal with some of the off-field trials and tribulations, no doubt. All right, Thursday Night Football. Cowboys now up to a 6-point favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook. Total on the game, 47, trending under. This will start a string of 3 straight road games for the Dallas Cowboys. First time since 2006 they've had to try and do all this. When you look at the Saints, they've really struggled. 6 points on Thanksgiving, the fewest in a game under Sean Payton. Less than 200 yards of total offense in that loss to the Bills. First 4-game losing streak since 2015. They've never lost 5 straight in the same season under Sean Payton. But again, much like we talked about with the Chargers and markets being efficient, Dallas started out the season like a house on fire. 6-1 straight up, 7-0 where it mattered most at the betting window. They've now gone 1-3 straight up and 1-3 against the number. But you have to think, as Dallas gets their weapons healthier on the offensive side, this Saints defense is good against the run, but they've been a real liability against the pass.
So I'm just going to spaz out a little bit here and just throw some stuff out there, and this doesn't need to be the most comprehensive breakdown, although on paper, Cowboys-Saints should be a good matchup. Unfortunately, it might not be, right? And it's just a monster game for both teams when you look at what's at stake here. Dallas has lost 2 straight. Saints have lost 4 straight. Kind of feels like the break-in-the-road type game where Dallas is attempting to prove they're still a legitimate contender and the Saints are trying to keep their season alive. If New Orleans can survive tonight, and that appears unlikely, there is some light at the end of the tunnel schedule-wise, because aside from a game against the Bucs, it's very manageable the rest of the way. But there's a lot of moving parts for both teams. Like we saw Dallas get steamed early in the week by price grabbers, laying the 4, got out to as high as 6.5 some places. Then McCarthy catches the big C. And news breaks as we're recording, I believe it was Monday's show, and a group just grabbed the 6 on New Orleans thinking it would come down. It did. It got back to 4. And then we saw this morning the line kind of settle in the 4.5 range, but now we are back out to 6.5 with the laundry list of guys out for the Saints again. And so with just so many kind of moving parts, I don't think this needs a full breakdown, but just some things that come to mind is Amari Cooper was activated and in the building. CeeDee Lamb is back. Huge considering that Cedric Wilson is out. What I have seen over the last 4 games or so is a good Saints defense that lost a ton of depth due to salary cap constraints this offseason start to wear down because its offense can't stay on the field. And now there's injuries specifically to the defensive end rotation where Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner, Tano, those 3 guys are out. Then your slot corner, Gardner Johnson, is out along with Malcolm Roach on the interior. Let me kind of be candid here. There's a very clear way to attack New Orleans defense, and the way Kellen Moore has devised game plans and called plays this season, I think we have to give him the benefit of the doubt that he will recognize the best way to attack them. And I think Dallas spends some time in some 2 tight end sets tonight, throw from that formation. They have to throw with play action from that formation. The Saints are giving up 9.7 yards per pass attempt defending 2 tight end sets and a 122 passer rating. New Orleans is one of the most sensitive defenses in the entire league to play action. Dak Prescott has been better this season throwing with a play fake element. Passer rating increases 19 points, adjusted accuracy 8% better. Dak's only made 1 turnover-worthy throw all season when throwing with play action. We know the way you attack the Saints defense through the air is picking on corner number 2, right? Paulson Adebo. He's somehow still getting more snaps than Bradley Roby despite being outplayed substantially. Adebo's allowed over 15 yards of reception, 4 touchdowns on 50 targets, good for a 119 passer rating allowed when targeted. And the problem that nobody seems to be talking about is also Marshawn Lattimore's production. It's completely dropped off a cliff. Started the season on fire, was back to his elite production level through 5 weeks. Since that time, Lattimore has turned out a negative coverage grade in each of the last 6 games. This could also mark the first time that we see Dak, Lamb, Cooper, Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, and La'el Collins start a game together. So huge boost there for that offense. Just quickly, the other side, right? Like injuries. Alvin Kamara was announced out.
Taysom Hill, baby.
Announced out.
Taysom Hill.
Taron Armstead, who was limited all last week, played on Thanksgiving night, has a full week to recover, was a DNP at practice all week, and then just got announced out as we started recording this. You know, you got 2 horses out along the offensive line, both your tackles. You're already down Andres Pete, your left guard. So now, like, what are you doing offensively? Troutman, who was leading the team in targets the 4 weeks prior to him being out. So now you've lost, like, your go-to guy. Taysom Hill, as you mentioned, is going to start. Is no one talking about this? He's dealing with a painful foot injury.
Well,
and it's why he hasn't been playing. There's a quote floating around.
Bingo. You nailed it.
Taysom Hill.
You nailed it there, and I think that's what a lot of people go, man, Trevor Siemian has sucked. How come Taysom Hill hasn't gotten in there? He's not 100%. If he can't run and he's a true pocket passer, good luck.
I'm paraphrasing, but this is what has been said about Taysom Hill. This is a pain management and pain tolerance thing. We hope it doesn't actually limit functionality. So, aside from the foot injury Taysom Hill's going to try to play through here, he's a quarterback with a career 91 passer rating when he's played under center before, and the talent and health around him on those offenses were substantially better than what he's going to play through tonight. Dallas also has a huge get back defensively in DeMarcus Lawrence, far and away their best defender, a true end that can set the edge and get after the quarterback. I have not bet this game. I do respect both factions that are against each other, but now that you know Ramczyk, Armstead, and Alvin Kamara are out, I would much rather be sitting on the side that laid Dallas -4 than the side that took the Saints +6.5, even though we're kind of at a market consensus of 6. But that's kind of where we are at right now with this game. Just a lot of injury. Dallas clearly the healthier side of the two. And at some point, even though Sean Payton's a great coach, you actually have to have chess pieces to make your coaching kind of come alive and look like it's great. And the Saints just don't have those chess pieces specifically on offense, and the defense is starting to wear down, and now teams are realizing how to attack them. And I think Kellen Moore will be cognizant of that way tonight.
Using a couple books that oftentimes serve as key indicators that we reference around here, there may be shops that cater to recreational customers that will be forced to go to 7 on this particular game. Once the public tangles and all of this information is available for public consumption. So if you like the dog, wait it out as long as possible. If you like the favorite, your ship may have sailed. But I could obviously see people trying to make a case for the Cowboys as a teaser just to win the game outright, knowing this team needs to get things back on track, with Washington narrowing that gap in the NFC East race that looked to be over weeks ago, slightly more competitive now amid Washington's resurgence. 5 games broken down as in-depth as we know how to do around these fine parts. John Sheeran adding outstanding context as always, talking about some of the book's needs, how they've adjusted on some of these teams throughout the course of the first 12 weeks. We know every time you get another data point, you can't completely ignore it, you can't underreact, but you also can't overreact to just a 60-minute sample size of football. One final thing, Payne, that we should try and get reconciled, of course, would be our best investment. But before we do that, FanDuel.com, use the promo code BetTheBoard, $1,000 risk-free bet. Enhanced odds on some of the biggest games this weekend in the National Football League. If you haven't already signed up for a FanDuel account, what are you waiting for? Just in time for the holidays, with bowl season right around the corner. NBA, NHL, college basketball, you name it. Such an extensive menu at your disposal at FanDuel. But without further ado, my friend, when you look at the big board in the National Football League, we talked about at the top of the show not being the most attractive that we've seen all season long. Is there a way for us to make a few greenbacks this weekend?
I do hate the card, and I've only bet one game. It was a total. It's moved 2.5 points, so I can't give it out. It doesn't have the value it once did. I know you and I were tossing some ideas around. I think we probably found one. Let's go, and I don't love the rest and prep advantage that the Raiders have, but I just think there's some fundamental differences here between the two teams. Let's go with Washington plus the points, and I would encourage in this specific situation to buy to 3. That's what I will be doing right now. We see the favorite like minus 2.5, minus 15. You can get to the 3 a little bit cheaper here, but ultimately it's different buying to 3 when you're not sure of what's going to come next. But ultimately, I believe what's going to happen in this game, based upon the people that I'm speaking with, that Darren Waller is going to get announced out. And there is going to be a wave of professional money, and this game has a chance to close pick. So, again, it's different buying, and we say this all the time, it's different buying to 3 if you know a game's going to close pick than if you're buying to 3 and the game's going to stay 2.5 minus 20. And so I would encourage buying to 3 on Washington. That's what I will be doing here. And in the words of Tommy Boy, you can get a good look at a T-bone by sticking your head up the bull's ass, but I'd rather take the butcher's word for it. So if you've just come to this best bet timestamp, take our word for Washington plus 3. If you actually want to stick your head up the bull's ass, this will be time-stamped. Washington and the Raiders is a game that we broke down. If you want to hear more about it, there you go, so I don't have to repeat myself and we can get out of Dodge.
Oh, I set the over-under at a half a reference for Tommy Boy, but it was heavily juiced to minus $6. So that's the biggest upset we'll see on the podcast today. I applaud the pop culture reference as always for you weaving it into all of this. I want to thank all of you, our loyal listeners, for tuning in each and every show throughout the course of the season. Remember, the Bet the Board pregame show goes live Friday afternoons, noon Eastern. We will dive back into some of these games. We'll have some of the best and leading voices in the industry to offer fresh perspective, and I think a unique twist that you'll see on the show tomorrow. People will be pretty intrigued by as well. Any final parting shots, or are we officially calling it quits for this week?
That's it.
All right, best of luck for all of you with your National Football League investments for Week 13, and with a Washington football team ticket in hand on Sunday afternoon. We'll see you at the window.